Welcome to Raising the Bar with RebuttalPR, the podcast where we elevate the stories of the plaintiff's bar and dive into the key trends shaping the civil justice system today. I'm your host, Ray DeLorenzi, and in each episode, we'll bring you insightful interviews with leading attorneys, expert perspectives on current legal events, and in-depth discussions on the issues that matter most. Now let's jump in.
The first thing is realizing as a new lawyer that the older lawyers don't know everything either. They don't know all the answers to all the questions. That's why they're asking you to do the research on whatever you're researching. So an older attorney is going to have more experience and eventually get there, but they also don't know everything. And I think that can be very reassuring to someone.
Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of Raising the Bar with RebuttalPR. I'm your host, Ray DeLorenzi, and today I'm honored to be joined by Nicole Smith, a partner with Langdon Emison. She helps manage the firm's mass tort practice and just has a really interesting background, starting as a law clerk at the firm, now becoming a partner there. So with that, Nicole, thanks so much for joining the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So you say that now. Let's see how you feel by the end of this, maybe. So hopefully all goes well. So your Missouri lawyer's profile mentions that you were inspired at age 11 to pursue a legal career after acting out a trial of the Lindbergh baby kidnapping in school, which seems like an odd thing as an 11-year-old to be acting
I
out in
know.
school. But so I have questions related to that. So why don't we tell me, I'm always interested in how people grew up or raised and whether that influenced them in becoming a lawyer. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was in sixth or seventh grade. I'm pretty sure it was sixth grade and that I was 11. We learned about the Lindbergh kidnapping as part of I'm pretty sure it was a language arts class, which I was thinking about this yesterday and I was like, I feel like this isn't adding up, but I'm pretty sure it's true. I know that I did this for a fact in school around that age, but we learned about the kidnapping, and then at the end of it we had a mock trial where people were witnesses and attorneys and different things. And I had always enjoyed mysteries. I loved Nancy Drew and Harry Potter and things like that. And I think for me it was the first time I really saw, well, what happens after the mystery's solved, and then how do people get justice? And then of course there's the arguments that there wasn't enough evidence to convict the defendant. So thinking about it from that perspective. So that kind of really sparked my interest in the law. I was interested in a lot of things after that, but I think that's the first time that I really understood the justice system.
Did you have any lawyers in your family or anyone you could look to as, oh, this is what a lawyer is?
No, I am the first person in my family to graduate from college. My parents did very well, but I'm the first person to graduate from college. I did grow up in a small town of about 4,500 people, and we were the county seat. So I did have friends' parents who were lawyers, and that was always something in my mind as, a potential profession because I just saw that a lot in our community. But yeah, that was probably how it's exposed.
So you went to William Jewell College. After graduation, you did a quick turn to go to law school. So was there a moment in undergrad where you're like, this is the path and I'm doing this? Or do you feel like you kind of just stumbled into it?
So I've always kind of been a jack of all trades person. I love learning. I had a lot of different ideas about what I wanted to do. I applied to architecture school, to journalism school. I was a teaching major for a short time, so I kind of tried it all out. And then I was actually doing student teaching and felt like I just couldn't really see myself teaching the same subject again and again every year because I do like learning. And I thought being a lawyer would just be something that I could pursue where I felt like I was helping people, but also challenged and learning things a lot of the time. So,
When you went to law school, did you have a sense of what type of law you wanted to practice?
yes. So at that time, I wanted to be either a prosecutor or a guardian ad litem, specifically for children. Probably more so the guardian ad litem part. Much to my dismay, I did not know I really didn't realize anything about the different types of law, honestly, and it's really hard to pay back your law school student loans being a guardian ad litem. So that kind of went out the window. I figured out I did not really like criminal law, because it just felt very overwhelming to me to have someone's life in my hands, whether that was from the prosecution side or the defense side. I actually did a brief clerkship in a Kansas court where I worked on some criminal opinions, and I very quickly was like, this is not for me. And so I graduated from William Jewell a semester early and had worked at a mass torts firm. And so I ended up going back there in law school and then clerking at Langdon and Emison. And so I kind of stumbled into the plaintiff's litigation that way.
When you had your first clerkship on, in a plaintiff's firm, going into it, what were your expectations, and were you already sort of gravitating towards that, or was like, let me dabble in this and see? Where was your head at the time?
Yeah, so I actually worked at the law firm my first clerkship was a law firm that I had worked for about 9 months between undergrad and law school. And it was complete accident. I knew I wanted to go to law school at that point, and I just applied to a bunch of law firms for like legal assistant positions, and that just happened to be where I got hired. Once I was doing the work, I really liked it. I liked feeling like I was helping people. I was working on a lot of settlement brochures, and I loved telling people stories. And so that was really kind of how I got into the plaintiff's litigation, just by accident. And then during law school, I went back there for my first clerkship after my 1 out year. So
Got it. Tell me about clerking at Langdon and Emison, and then what made you want to have a career there, and also why you think they wanted you to have a career there.
so there's a lot to that story. I had been doing mass torts plaintiffs litigation, and I wanted to do something that was a little bit more focused on single clients or single events instead of mass torts. And at the time, that was primarily what Langdon and Emison was doing. So Langdon and Emison was started in the town that I grew up in. So I had a little bit of a personal connection. That's usually helpful, I've found, in a lot of different areas. And so, yeah, I did interview with them. I ended up getting hired. I really loved the work that I was doing on the single event cases, and I wanted to come back after law school, but they did not hire new grads at the time. So I actually ended up going to work for another attorney who had mentored me over the years and I had worked for in high school and college, and started my career there.
Why don't you tell me a bit about your practice today and what you focus on at the firm?
Yeah, so I'm actually a little bit in a transition period right now. We So Langdon and Emison did end up getting into mass torts, and that was the practice area that I focused on for the last 8 years or so. But we are finding it harder and harder to just keep up with the new firms that are kind of specializing in that now. And so we're scaling back to more doing just like leadership work in those roles. So I've started to work on single event cases again as well, which I have helped out with single event cases over the years, especially with like a research and writing project or something like that. But now I'm taking on more of those cases. And so it's been a really exciting time for me.
Let's talk about sort of the mass tort world, and as you said, there's firms that specialize it. They collect a lot of cases, and then you have
hmm
firms that you know are, of course, they have cases, but they're looking to lead them. Have you seen both sides of that coin, and how do you view sort of the future of mass torts and the plaintiff's bar trending?
Oh gosh, I have seen both sides of
Right.
that coin. And I am personally someone who just I do well with mass torts because I'm very organized. I implemented a lot of trainings and SOPs and things, and I really enjoy kind of more of that business side of practicing law that a lot of lawyers really don't like to do. But I also really like to treat each case, give it the fullest attention. And I feel like that's hard to do in mass torts sometimes. And there are bigger law firms who are coming up with systems to be able to, handle a lot of cases. And I think that's great because you can help a lot of people that way. But we're focusing more on just leadership opportunities where, you are working on experts, depositions, briefing that affects the whole litigation. And, you know, I think the trend is going to be that the majority of mass tort cases are handled by firms kind of specializing in that. I think leadership will probably continue to be a hybrid of attorneys from both types of firms. So,
So, you mentioned how when you have so many clients, it's difficult to know them on a one-on-one basis. I sort of had you walk into that in the sense of I want to talk about a law review article you wrote about early vetting.
yes.
And do you believe that factor in terms of a firm having a lot of, cases that they are managing supports the idea that early vetting may be a good thing? Or do you feel like those things really have nothing to do with each other?
So, I mean, my opinion is that you should be vetting your cases when you're taking them. My issue with the early vetting rules that have been proposed and the census rules that have been proposed is that the information is really no different than what is asked for in like a plaintiff fact sheet or plaintiff profile form. And so at that point, I mean, it's really just creating extra work. You're just entering the same information 10 different times in response to 10 different things, but it's all the same basic case information that we should be getting anyway. So,
What inspired you to write the article? And we'll make sure in the show notes to include a link to it because it's been a
yeah,
hot topic in the plaintiff's bar. So anyway, I'm curious
it
what.
is a hot topic. So hopefully I haven't stepped on too many toes with that one. Um, yeah. So I was actually working with another attorney at the time. Her name's Trisha Campbell. She is at Wagstaff and Cartmel now. But she used to be at Langdon and Emison, and so she was asked to write the article and asked me if I would be interested in co-authoring it with her and helping her out with that. So that was how I got involved. I feel like my career has been a lot of I've been in the right place at the right time, and just connections kind of snowball over the years. But yeah, so Trisha got me involved in that, but we did both have similar opinions on it, so it made it really easy to write. And uh, I know it is still a little bit controversial. I had someone say something about it. I haven't heard about that for a while, but someone did ask me about it probably 6 months or so ago. So yeah.
God, in a good or bad way? The way you made it sound like it was
Um,
a
they were criticizing me, so, but that's okay.
got it. Curious, were they on the plaintiff side or the defense side?
Plaintiff side, more generally, but they thought that the census was a good idea, which is, I don't know, kind of surprising to me. But
Yeah. What you mentioned earlier about how a lot of lawyers are not big on practicing the business of law, and they can maybe outstanding lawyers, but also you have to run a law firm like a business, and it seems like that's something you mentioned gravitating more towards. What has that looked like at a firm like Langdon and Emison, which has been around for many years, but obviously with technology evolving, what role have you played in terms of looking more at the business side?
yeah, so I'd say my business role has really been more limited to the mass tort part of our firm, which is honestly kind of a smaller practice area for us. But of course, working on revenue projections and trying to analyze if a mass tort is going to be profitable in the long run and is worth getting into. I think as lawyers, we always want to help people, and it's really exciting to, it's can be very exciting whenever a new case comes along, but at the end of the day, you are still a business. So just trying to figure out if it's something that you can pursue and, actually come up on the upside at the end of the day. A lot of cases have been kicked on Dauber in the mass tort world lately, so that's been really hard. Although the Tylenol cases were just revived, so that is very exciting. So I guess there's the revenue projections, and then there's, of course, kind of the personnel and the hiring and all of that kind of stuff. So making sure your team is working together well. We always try to divide things up, play to people's strengths. Some people are great on the phone, other people are better at, doing more detail-oriented discovery, that sort of thing. Yeah, I've really enjoyed the operations part of it. And so I've liked being exposed to that. I'm not as exposed to our operations as a whole at Langdon and Emison. I mean, I'm familiar at a surface level, but not
Yeah.
as in depth.
But, law schools are notorious for not teaching anything relating to running a business or
Yeah.
operations. Have you had any mentors to be like, okay, this is how you do a revenue projection? Or was it just like, I'm going to figure this out?
It was more just, I'm gonna figure this out. I feel like my brain just works that way. And,
Uh,
a lot of lawyers, they don't like math and they don't, and I actually love math. And so it's kind of fun for me to have a break. So I call it a break, a break from legal work sometimes to just do something different. Yeah, law school does not teach you anything about running a law firm. I think most lawyers don't realize, some real lawyers I don't think ever realize, but a lot of lawyers don't realize until later in their career that running a law firm is like running a business, and you do have to learn marketing and budgeting and all of those things. I mean, I guess you don't have to, but it really helps with your success if you
yeah.
do, I think. So to be aware of those things. So the other thing I feel like law school doesn't teach well, I mean, obviously there's a lot of lawyers who have figured it out, but you learn a lot about research and writing in law school, and I don't feel like you learn a lot about actually practicing law. So those first few years of your career are really kind of law school 2.0 probably, and you're just kind of stumbling around trying to figure it out. So,
I want to come back to that point in a second. I wanted to ask you about the sort of the business side. Have you ever had to be the bearer of bad news in the sense of there's like a lawyer that really wants to pursue a certain mass tort and you look at it and say the math doesn't math, or vice versa? Have you seen one where you're like, we can make an impact here and need
yeah.
to sell it accordingly?
I feel like I've been on both sides of that, and I mean, I do remember I recommended that we should get into a litigation that did not work out very well, and I was younger and did not know the right questions to ask at the time. Like the medical device at issue had a very, very small market share. It was impossible almost to find cases, and it just didn't really ever go anywhere. But whenever I saw it, I thought I mean, I do think it was a great case as far as the device being defective and the failures and things, but it was just very hard to find cases. I feel like we've also been on the other side. I'm probably more conservative, so there are a lot of cases that we have gotten into that I did not think that we should get into. And honestly, it's been probably 50-50 as far as success on those. So I do tend to be pretty conservative, and I prefer medical device case over pharmaceutical cases just because I think they are easier on a mass tort scale. Pharmaceutical cases can just get so hard when you're asking clients about medication that they've taken for years, especially if it's available, over the counter and not just prescription. And you've got the name brand medications and the generic medications, and they just can get very complicated. So,
So does that intersect with the idea of learning about the law versus learning how to practice law? I assume these are some of the things that they don't really cover very well in law school.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, they don't cover anything like that in law school. That's kind of just you just gotta figure it out. Attend whatever webinars and conferences you can and, you know, make friends, learn from other people, and eventually it finally starts clicking into place. Especially, I mean, I do think a lot of lawyers do end up kind of in, I guess, a niche or a specific practice area, and then you can really kind of get more experience with that. I like to tell people who aren't lawyers, they come to me with legal questions, and I'm just like, it's like you're asking a hand doctor about, a cardiology issue. So,
I know you're very involved in the local legal community. You're a graduate of the KCMBA's Bar Leadership Academy. You belong to the AWL of Greater Kansas City. I'm wondering about, you talked about sort of learning to be a lawyer, and has it been, it seems like it's something that you care about, helping other lawyers coming up to learn how to be lawyers. Tell me a little bit
yeah.
about that work you've done.
Yes, I love mentoring new lawyers. I think it honestly comes up from feeling like the first few years were very hard for me and wanting to help other people navigate through that. Currently, I'm on the board of the Association for Women Lawyers in Kansas City, and I'm the newsletter chair, so we get to spotlight different members, and then that's been a nice way to just talk to younger attorneys on a regular basis and get to know a little bit more about them. I also am on the Missouri Bar's Wellbeing in the Profession Committee, and so something that we have recently talked about is potentially doing some kind of mentorship program. Um, there's a lot of logistics to figure out to see if that would actually work out or not, but AWL in Kansas City does a fantastic mentorship program that I was a part of starting in 2020 as a mentee. And I'm sure in the future I will also be a mentor. I've done other kind of informal mentorship things through AWL and the law schools and stuff. So,
I know you recently spoke at the Society of Women Trial Lawyers. My colleague Stephanie Wolf is on the board, and the topic was mom guilt, the internal conflict.
yeah.
If you're comfortable, I'd be curious about what was the genesis of that and what you shared with the audience.
Yeah. I feel like I probably should have come up with a different title because we covered a lot of things other than just mom guilt. But I mean, really, we talked a lot about work-life balance and the demands of being a lawyer and trying to balance that with also being a parent, or maybe you don't have to be a parent for this to be applicable. Of course, people have parents, family, friends, or just a life and other things that you want to do. And so I know that can be really hard sometimes because the work that we're doing just feels very important. We're a lot of times going to impact someone's life greatly depending on how successful the litigation that you're working on is. There are deadlines that a lot of times you are not in control of, which can be really frustrating whenever it messes up your plans. I think one of my biggest pieces of advice, and I'm sure that there are probably attorneys or law firms who don't appreciate this, but I generally try to keep my work to our office hours because my to-do list is so long and it will never be done ever. I mean, until I'm done practicing law. And so unless I'm working on something where it's like this motion is due tomorrow or in a few days and we are not where we need to be and I really need to keep working, I usually go home at 5 or 5:30 and I focus on spending the rest of the night with my family. I have a 3.5-year-old and a 14-month-old. And whenever I don't do that, I feel like I just don't see them, and I'm not okay with that. So,
Yeah, and those are ages when you're in it. So,
I'm very tired most of the time.
um, when young lawyers are struggling professionally, unrelated to potentially being a parent or whatnot, what's the sort of immediate question you ask or advice you give that you wish you had when you were a young lawyer?
Oh gosh, that is a good question. There are a couple of things that come to mind. I think the first thing is realizing as a new lawyer that the older lawyers don't know everything either. They don't know all the answers to all the questions. That's why they're asking you to do the research on whatever you're researching. And kind of just, I'm not going to say that you're equal. I mean, you aren't equal, but obviously someone has an older attorney is going to have more experience and eventually you will get there, but they also don't know everything. And I think that can be very reassuring to someone. As far as, trying to, I guess, push yourself and get ahead as a young lawyer, I think just trying to think about the big picture. What is going to happen like what is the next step in the case? What needs to happen next? What needs to happen, in a couple of weeks? How is what you're working on now going to tie into that? Instead of just waiting to be told what to do, asking, should I work on this next? Or even just saying, I'm going to work on this next. Let me know if you have different ideas. I think an older attorney really appreciates whenever you can take that initiative and relieve the burden from them. But it usually takes younger attorneys a couple of years before they really feel confident doing that. So,
With that, Nicole Smith of Langdon and Emison in Kansas City, Missouri. Thanks so much for joining the podcast. Really appreciate the time.
yeah, thank you so much for having me on today. It was great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Raising the Bar with Rebuttal PR. Don't forget to subscribe and follow to join us next time. See you then.